What's up, everybody? Liam Bauer here at Truth Not Trends. That's right, it is 2025. It's a brand new year, brand new you on the horizon. You have goals, we have answers. Today, we are actually flashing back to one of our oldest episodes. That's right, episode number 2. It's a blast from the past, back when we were coming to you live from our mother's basements. That's right, me and Jesse. I think Jesse was just a few handful of days into his training career. And I was all the way back in year 29. 2025 is going to be 37 years for me in the fitness business. So enjoy this episode, blasting back. But before that, remember to check out the TNT supplements in our store. We have 5 awesome nutritional supplements. That's right. We have some delicious chocolatey good whey protein, some fish oil for all those anti-inflammatory friendly fat needs. We got some great probiotics for that gut biome balance that everybody's looking for. We also have some creatine monohydrate, the best, most researched performance-enhancing supplement out there, and some K2D3 for those immunities. We got it all. We want to recommend a high-protein whole food diet, but if you got some holes in that plan, you can reach out, get some supplements, take care of that. And don't forget, if you're trying to build the best home gym possible, I highly recommend you check out the Inata Gym. Inata Gym makes incredible smart gym platforms. And if you visit Inata Gym and use the code TAKU, that's TAKU, you can get 20% off anything in the Inata Gym store. So sit back, relax, enjoy 2025, and get all your questions answered about just what is high-intensity strength training with this blast from the past, episode number 2 of the Truth Not Trends podcast.
Stand by for action. We are about to launch.
Follow any guy around in the gym, the biggest, strongest guy. If you were to go follow a guy, he says, I spend 3 hours in the gym. You follow that guy around and then write down the actual time that he's working, on the machine, pushing a weight, pulling a weight. Right. Write down the actual time, not the time he talks, drinks water, flexes in the mirror, all that kind of stuff. You're going to find that he probably only works for about 20 or 30 minutes too.
Right. You are literally voluntarily applying an overload stress to your body. It does not appreciate that.
Yeah.
In the moment. Later on you will, because you'll be stronger.
We are about to launch.
Truth Not Trends. Back straight to you from our mother's basements. This is Jesse Schmidt and Liam Bauer.
Back in the basement.
Back in the basement. This is everything you know is wrong. I'm a trainer for 215 days now. Liam is going on 29, going on 30 years of experience. We are the guru and the apprentice, coming straight at you from Oakland, California. And today, the myth that we're going to be busting is this. You need to do 3 to 5 sets of 8 to 12 reps 4 to 5 times a week to see strength gains. Liam, tell me why that's wrong.
All right. What we find is that everything we're talking about is based on the science that's out there, the current reliable science that's coming out. This sets and reps thing has been argued and will be argued probably for all of time. Some of the reason why there's still always questions is that, in my opinion, number one, the research is showing that essentially anything in the 1 to 3 set range is essentially equal.
Right.
Okay. So is 1 set better? Not necessarily. 2 sets will work. 3 sets can work. The truth is you can go to the gym and have results doing any number of sets if you take all the other factors into account. But we're coming from a place of what is, number one, the least amount of work required to achieve the goal, right? The number one thing you always hear is there's no time. Everybody doesn't have enough time to get to the gym.
Right. For you tech people, we're talking about minimum viable product. What's the lowest amount of energy?
Sometimes I use the kind of medicine analogy of minimum effective dose, right? Think of it as medicine. We want the dose that gives us the result without any negative side effects and is still giving us the thing we're after. So the problem is that every time you add a set, your benefit flattens out quickly. And what they're finding is once you get past that 3 set range, the curve of benefit flattens right out. So anything above that, you basically are losing benefits.
And why is that?
Well, number one, we have the way that muscle fibers are recruited, right? When we lift weights, muscle fibers are recruited, and they're recruited in an orderly fashion.
So there are different kinds of muscle fibers.
Right. Everybody's probably heard at this point, or many people have heard of the idea of slow twitch fibers, fast twitch fibers. There's also intermediate fibers. We're not going to get lost in the fiber thing. But what happens is that the current accepted theory of muscle fibers is what's called Henneman's size principle. And what that is that the fibers are always recruited in an orderly fashion from the lower threshold to the higher threshold. Lower threshold meaning slower twitch fibers that can produce results with less of a load. They're called slow twitch because they're slower to fatigue, actually. The actual rate that they can produce of effort is not a huge, there's not a huge difference of the firing rates ultimately. Obviously, basketball players slam dunk with their body weight. They fly through the air. Those are not necessarily high twitch fibers because they only need to lift the load of their body versus doing, a 500-pound squat where you have to recruit much bigger fibers. So the fibers are recruited sequentially and actively. As I start to lift a weight, the small guys come in, the low intensity guys come in, and the brain only recruits the fibers in order as they're needed to produce the effort. All right. So as I get more fatigued, it has to call more guys in. Right. Guys are pooping out. I got a team of guys. They've done as much as they can. It has to recruit the bigger guys, the stronger guys. I'm still going. Right. And what happens is eventually, as we reach fatigue, we've recruited all the fibers we're going to recruit for that moment. Now, when we stop, we put the weight down, we rest. If we pick that weight up again and do it again, we're not calling in a bunch of other guys that weren't around the first time. We're calling those same guys back in that same order, but they've already been a little fatigued today. So now we're going to just fatigue them some more. And if we put that weight down and then do it again, the process repeats itself. And so what we find is that we're just tiring out those same fibers more and more and more, but not producing more of a result. We haven't brought in some other guy that we somehow left behind, and now he gets pulled in on that fifth magical set. It doesn't happen that way.
So we kind of have to ask ourselves, what's our main goal when we're doing strength training or resistance training? I mean, are we trying to get stronger? Are we there to burn calories? Are we there to lose weight? Do we want to just do the maximum amount of movement possible because you're supposed to be at the gym for 60 minutes or 2 hours?
Good question.
What's the real reason?
So the truth is, despite what the goal is, that's what's so cool about it. It doesn't matter what your ultimate goal is. The number one goal of your training to be directed is get stronger. If we get as strong as possible, there's no negative side effect of that. You can never be too strong, as one of my good friends, coach, mentor, Jim Schmitz likes to say, you can never be too strong. And that is true. Strength transcends everything, gender, sports, whatever, right? We can all want to be as strong as possible. When we get as strong as possible, we then can, if our goal is to move more weight, we can do it. If our goal is to burn more calories, if we produce more muscle, it's going to happen. If our goal is to be more functional in activities of daily living, it's going to happen. So the goal is just to get as strong as possible, no matter what your other goal is. Strength training should be supporting that. And then if you're an athlete, we go in a specific direction with other aspects of training. If you're a strength-specific athlete, again, if you're just Joe Blow who wants to be able to go out and jog now and then, but wants his muscles to be stronger. The reality is just get stronger. If you're a pure strength athlete, there may be some small benefit to slightly higher volume of training because you're willing to put in the time to get that extra 1%. But for the average guy, is it better to add another 30, 40% of time to get that extra 1% out of your training? Some people might think so, but the reality is that it's pretty minimal. And what I'm finding now after all this time is that my strongest guys train the least often. It seems counterintuitive because they're able to put so much effort into the training and in the session that they need a greater amount of recovery.
Absolutely.
Keep in mind that if you are below that threshold, if you go too low, you're not triggering any response, essentially, right? So you're just going through the motions at that point. Sometimes I jokingly say you're just heating up the room, right? So we don't want to just go in and, there's no magic number of reps. So we don't want to just, go and do 3 sets of 10 because that's what I read in a magazine somewhere, but never actually work hard on any of those sets.
Right.
We're not getting any benefit.
Yeah. So, so that you brought up an interesting things, how many reps is too many? How many reps is too few? How do we know? So what I've come to understand is your brand of personal training, right? Your philosophy is essentially, some people call it high intensity training. And as I understand it, essentially, if you're comfortable with a movement, say you're going to do a bench press or a deadlift or a leg press or whatever it is, you walk up to the machine or the weight that you're gonna use. You go in with the mindset that I'm going to do one set. I'm going to do as many repetitions as possible until I fail. Am I right there?
Yes. So one of the terms I use these days instead of high intensity training is effort based, right? The training is effort based because that's what the science says, right? The science supports that effort is the most important quality. Intensity is based on effort. Although there's a huge number of coaches out there who try to say that intensity is based on the poundage that you use, and they'll argue that to their death. That's not what science says. Science says effort is based on, or intensity is based on the momentary effort. And again, what the current science is saying is whether I do a weight that's 30% of my virtual one repetition maximum or 90% of my virtual one repetition maximum, as long as I go to failure, I will get benefit out of it. So the downside to using a much lighter load is it takes a lot longer to get to that point of failure. On the other side, I might get there too soon. There turns out to be about a sweet spot where the muscles get the maximum benefit. And that for most people, that sweet spot is somewhere between about 45 and 90 seconds.
Okay, so for 45 and 90 seconds, so what we're talking about here is time under tension.
Right.
This is something, if you're on the Arnold program or you're new to the gym or whatever, you may only be familiar with your run-of-the-mill repetition, which is just up, down, okay? And you're not necessarily thinking about, something like an AMRAP, right? Doing as many reps as possible you can within an allotted time period, which means essentially selecting a weight where you're going to get to muscular failure somewhere, like Liam says, in that, 45-ish second time period, right?
Yeah. And again, what you do find is you can get sort of sport specific if you want to use that term. I try to shy away from those things, or athlete specific or fiber type specific, whatever, where you'll find that your power based athletes, they won't need as much time under tension. You're going to keep them in that lower end of the range, where in that 30, 45 second range, football players, guys that are pure power guys, and sprinters, that kind of thing. And then you got your marathon runners, you got them on the high end of the range where they're going to go for 90 seconds easily before they fatigue. You're going to want them to be spending more time. And, that's where you can start to get more specific. But the reality is you don't need lots of sets, and you don't need to repeat them over and over again. One analogy I like to use is the elevator idea. You're all waiting for the elevator. You press the button, the light turns on. What happens? People keep coming up and pressing the button, even though they see the lights on. They keep pressing and pressing it. The elevator's not going to get there any faster, right? So the reality, once we've done that press, it's on its way. So once we've done that good set to failure, the process that you're trying to set in motion has been set in motion. And anything else beyond that is just kind of wasted time.
Right. That's I like that metaphor a lot. Another one that I've used with clients is you're digging for buried treasure, right? And you dig a couple feet down and you hit the treasure chest, right? You get to it. Now you can keep digging, but you're not going to get anywhere. All you're going to do is dig a deeper and deeper recovery hole to get out of.
Right.
And so essentially, you've already stimulated that adaptation, right? You've applied the unaccustomed stimulus. That's one phrase that you use a lot that I like. You applied a new stimulus to your body, which is overload.
Right.
It's working harder than you've ever worked. And once you do that, you're good to go. If you've really truly in one set, you've got your 8, 10, 12 reps. The reps are irrelevant. As long as you've worked absolutely as hard as you can, there's no need to do any more sets.
Yeah.
You're done.
That's the truth. People will argue again forever. You'll always find someone who wants to argue the point. But again, the science is supporting this stuff. On another topic, we'll talk about, conditioning things, in the bigger picture of things. I'm known a lot for interval training, for talking and writing about interval training. And, I've been talking about the brief, intense conditioning side of things since the beginning of my career. And that's what I'm known for in my writing and so forth, and quite a bit. And the effort is what's important, not the time that you spend. People will argue about, calories burned, what burns more calories and so forth. It's not important. Again, I'm always after what's efficient. What's the efficient way to achieve the end result? If someone's goal is to spend as much time as they can in the gym, they can go and do it as much as they want. You know what I mean? If you want to spend 7 days a week in the gym for 3 hours a day, but, you know, you're just, as Mike Menser would say, you know, you're just partaking in a social ritual at that point.
Right.
You're not necessarily doing anything of benefit in your training. You're wasting a lot of time. But hey, if that's what you want to do with your time, I want to be there as little as possible and know that I did the most work I can for that time.
I can say, you know, well, part of the reason that I have so much respect for your system is that it is objective and science-based. And I see so many trainers and other systems out there that are anecdotal, and they say, well, I got big, doing, guys, I got big doing, working my arms every single day of the week.
Right.
And kind of the attitude that you have toward that is, well, you must have amazing genetics if you got big in spite of training every day of the week, because essentially you're not allowing your muscles to recover and go through that rebuilding process.
Yeah, I've never had anyone suffer from a little bit extra recovery. People don't get weaker. You'll hear all these ridiculous arguments or discussions about how people got weaker because they weren't doing as much volume of training. It's not true. The reality, in my experience, is that people who don't do this training or feel it's not effective, they don't really want to work as hard as is required. It requires hard work. But once you embrace that hard work, it also requires much less time. You're not saving energy for anything. You're not trying to get through that hour or 2 hour workout. You're getting in and getting it done. Just today, I was talking to a client who felt like he actually said to me, well, it takes me so much time to walk to the gym. And so I don't feel like I'll be happy if I then am leaving 20 minutes later. I go, if you want to spend more time in the gym, you can. But if you've achieved what you need to in that 20 minutes, walk away. You know what I mean? I go do something else with that time, right? Because he felt like, well, if I spent the time to get there, I need to spend more time to make it worth my while, right?
So there are some other things going on there. When you go into a gym and you buy a training package, for example, you're being sold a product, right? And most of them are going to be, we're here, we're going to do an hour training session. And so the expectation from the client's perspective is, well, I'm supposed to get an hour. I should be like dripping sweat and working for this entire hour.
Right.
But we're finding that the reality is that is really, it might even be counterintuitive to your ultimate goal of getting stronger, losing weight, of doing all those things.
Yeah, the truth is that for years I've been doing 30-minute sessions. And I've had the luxury of working in places where the sessions were billed and booked as 30-minute sessions. People recognize that going in, they were only going to do 30-minute sessions. And the reality is the hard work part is even less. But anyone who worked with me over time recognizes quickly that they can't really work hard for more than about 20 or 30 minutes.
Right.
They need that other time. So what happens we've been programmed as a culture to function in hour blocks. I got a hairdressing appointment. I got a dentist appointment. I got a doctor's appointment, this or that. Everything's in hour blocks. And so we've been sold that concept in training. If you looked at the big trend in personal training, you'll notice over time, it used to be 1 hour sessions. A lot of places have gone to 55-minute sessions. You know what I mean? Or even less, right? That's real common. 50-minute sessions, I even see. 25-minute sessions. So they're starting to recognize you don't need that hour, number one. So they're selling it in slightly smaller chunks. But even with an hour session, as Jesse's probably found, and I definitely find, is, part of that now is dedicated to warming up, stretching, answering questions, addressing all kinds of other things. The actual work part is never more than about 15 or 20 minutes of hard work. And if you follow any guy around in the gym, the biggest, strongest guy, if you were to go follow a guy, he says, I spend 3 hours in the gym. You follow that guy around and then write down the actual time that he's working, on the machine, pushing a weight, pulling a weight.
Right.
Write down the actual time, not the time he talks, drinks water, flexes in the mirror, all that kind of stuff. You're going to find that he probably only works for about 20 or 30 minutes too.
Right. It's kind of like watching a football game. The clock keeps running. They're not necessarily, moving the entire time, but the clock's running.
Exactly. A football game is supposed to last 1 hour, right? But it takes 3 hours on TV.
Right.
So that's the truth. Even those guys, if you time, I can imagine that it's only a few minutes of actual work in a football game.
Yeah.
If you were to time each play, 3 seconds, 7 seconds,
We'll have to look up that number for a future episode.
I'm sure somebody did it.
Yeah. All right. So, okay, now we know what high intensity training is, or effort-based training.
Yeah, the tenets are brief, intense, and frequent, right? 3 major tenets of the training. The training must be brief. Anything intense, if something's, the more intense it is, the briefer it has to be, right? If I'm sprinting as fast as possible, I'm going to poop out in 10 or 20 seconds. If I jog, I can go for a long time. If I walk, I can go indefinitely, right? We all know that. we all know we can't sprint for an hour. So same thing with weight. As our intensity goes up, the duration has to go down. And then we need recovery time because the workout does not produce the result, right? The result manifests during the recovery process. So now we got to get out of the way.
Muscle rebuilding.
Exactly. The workout is only a stimulus, right? It's a trigger. It starts things in motion.
Is that a Dorian Yates quote, by the way?
No, I think probably Mentor talks about that.
Intense, and
the brief, intense, and frequent. That's like the tenets of Arthur Jones, who sort of thought of as the godfather of high intensity training. Again, lots of misinformation about that guy. We could go a whole session just talking about him. But one of his associates, Ellington Darden, was the one who sort of codified it, tried to create a system that had principles that were laid out. Arthur Jones was much more of a freestyle kind of guy. Ellington Darden took it and said, these are the three things: brief, intense, and frequent. And also full body workouts is another thing that they believe in, in high intensity training. Again, there's many variants these days of people that might call it that. Again, the effort-based, there's many branches off of that tree.
Right.
But those are the basic tenets. Brief, intense, and frequent full body workouts, maximum effort, minimal volume, respect the recovery process.
Yeah. And that's an onion that we'll continue to unpeel throughout this podcast process. But so now we know what it is. Tell me what it feels like. If I'm going into the gym with some bodybuilding.com program that says 3 to 5 sets, 8 to 12 reps, or maybe I've never been in the gym and I've never worked to momentary muscular fatigue.
Right.
What does it feel like?
Yeah. And it varies, right, from person to person. But the reality is it feels very uncomfortable most of the time in that moment. It's not the idea of no pain, no gain, where we never want to injure ourselves. So there's a difference between effort-based discomfort, right? Because when we're going through a set, let's use the bench press again as an example. For whatever guy, even the guy who does the 5x5, whatever, the first rep is never a maximum effort, right?
Right.
Each successive rep, you're expecting it to feel harder, although the weight has not changed, right? Why does it feel harder? Because we're using up momentary resources that are available. As we
ATP.
All that energy, right? We're using it up. The first rep, not so bad. Each successive rep should feel harder than the one before. What we're looking for is to go on our own sort of scale of 1 to 10 within that set. 1 being starting out doing nothing. I'm just about to begin. I'm lying on the bench looking up at the bar. And 10 being I'm pushing as hard as I possibly can and the bar doesn't move anymore. Okay. Right. And I want to reach that stage successively. Each rep will then, of any exercise, should feel harder than the rep before until finally the last rep is literally a maximal effort. In the perfect world, I'm now teaching the people not only then, they're not done then. They're only done when they try to move as hard as they can and the weight literally doesn't move anymore.
Right.
And that's where
it's possible to go past that.
There is, of course. You can go deeper in, and that's a whole other thing. Extending the sets to go get deeper inroads. But so we want to reach that point. And that is often associated with a great level of discomfort, which if you're not used to, can cause, kind of a fight or flight response. People are wiggling around.
Literally.
Things are burning.
Literally. I've seen people try to run away from a bench press. Try to get out from under the bar while they're holding it above them.
And so that's what it feels like. By the end of that set, you should feel like you're literally pushing or pulling as hard as you possibly can, and you're not able to produce any movement any longer.
To me, like I had a client just this morning. We were doing an exercise, and he called it a tricep inferno.
Okay.
And so to me, and a lot of people that I train, it feels like burning.
Yeah.
It feels like a burning sensation. And when we're talking about working to or through fatigue, I mean, we're talking about there are kind of stages, like Liam's just talking about, where initially you're just kind of pushing and you're not putting forth very much effort, and then as repetitions successfully progress, you're gonna start to feel that burn, and then you're really gonna start to feel that burn, and then you're gonna have this you might have an alarm reaction where your brain is literally telling you it's fight or flight. And you see a couple different reactions with people, and one is they try to run away from the activity, whatever it is, and they might just drop the weight because it's too intense.
Right.
But then
you see them squirming around a lot because they're wishing they could get away.
And that's when trainers will talk about, compensations that are being made. The head comes forward, or the shoulders change posture, or whatever. The knees cave in. All all that different stuff when you start to get fatigued starts to happen. But then there's another reaction, and this is kind of how you know that you're reaching like a higher level of being trained and comfort with the exercises that you're doing, is that when you reach that high intensity point, you actually start to dig in a little bit deeper. And even though, and that's why I've started to kind of talk to my clients in a little bit more of a philosophical light, because really what it's about at that point is building mental and physical resilience.
Absolutely.
Because you are literally voluntarily applying an overload stress to your body. It does not appreciate that.
Yeah.
In the moment. Later on you will, because you'll be stronger.
Exactly. So we want to turn the flight to fight in most of these cases, what we're really after. We want people to learn to fight instead of run. And some people naturally are fighters, and they will dig in right away, and you'll find those guys. They're usually fewer and further between. Most people have to learn to do it. But as far as Jesse was talking about, that sort of moment where the alarm response shows up, that happens to everyone. Everyone gets that response. And in the beginning,
it never goes away.
For me, in the beginning, when it happened to me, I gave up. I felt it, and I got scared and would give up. And the guy would have to take the weight off of me if I was doing a free weight. He'd have to spot me immediately. Now, I've recognized after many, many years of training, when that alarm response shows up, my cues to myself then are, now is when the set's really beginning. So jokingly, a lot of times I say, when it gets to that point, now try to do 3 more, right? Yeah. When it hurts, do 3 more. A lot of times I'll tell people. Yeah. That's where you dig in. And as you perfect this ability to see people's effort and perceive what they're going through as a trainer, it's part of the art and the science. Now I start to know exactly where that point is coming. I can see it in the person. And then I know how much more they have left. So even though they're giving up in their mind, like, oh my God, this is scary, I need to stop now. I'm like, okay, now we're going to try to do 5 more from here. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then often they still can get it, depending again on the person. Sometimes we'll use the term volitional fatigue instead of momentary muscular fatigue. And volitional fatigue is, in my mind, is slightly different because people often give up before sooner. Right. It's kind of the idea that the mind gives up before the body does. Exactly. So a lot of times what I do is I allow for volitional fatigue early on when they're learning. And if they go, oh, that's all I can do, I let them stop there in the beginning. But I'm taking notes and recognizing, okay, now we find this edge that we need to push back. Right. And we want it to eventually be true momentary muscular fatigue versus volitional fatigue, where they just kind of mentally couldn't take it anymore. And hopefully over time they learn to push through that discomfort and really continue to push. And the alpha guys, the ones, and girls who are able to push, not only do they keep digging, but even when the thing isn't moving, they'll continue to push for another 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Yeah. And then they truly have made an inroad that's impressive, and definitely don't need to repeat that process again. Right. Yeah. And I mean, just in my experience, I think this is what really makes you a masterful trainer, is knowing, and for other trainers out there and for clients, if you're a client, just not only, progressively increasing your weights, but progressively increasing and taking inventory of how much effort you're putting forth. I mean, are you getting to that point where you're pushing as hard as you can and then continuing pushing? Or do you still have some ways to go on that? Because I think there comes a point when you start to really crave that. And if you don't reach that point where you are failing, where you are burning like crazy and your body just gives out, you're going to wonder, did I really give everything to that lift? Am I really generating all the new strength that I could be generating? Yeah. And that's a great point. And so part of that is to remember your goal is to one up yourself. All right. So like I jokingly I say this is strength, the 30-second version of strength training. Choose an exercise, do as many perfect reps as you possibly can, write it down, and next time try to do more than you did last time. Right? That's literally it in a nutshell. We need to one up ourselves. Again, with my client today, he was asking all these questions, but he was sort of like, well, I'll think about this, and I was like, you need to write it down. Right? I said, people who don't write it down, like keeping a training journal is a really good thing. If you're not writing it down, someone's not writing it down somewhere. How are you going to know that you are challenging yourself more than last time? Did you extend your time under tension? Did you add a few seconds? Did you add a rep? Did you add some weight? How much weight did I do? That's why you see so many people in the gym spinning their wheels. They come in and pick up the same weight, they do the same reps, they put it down. In the back of their mind, you better believe most of them recognize there's no efficacy.
Yeah, and early on it might work. You might be able to walk up to, and do your back squats and say, oh, wow, I squatted, 135 last time. I'll throw an extra 10 pounds on it, and it's easy to remember. But the more trained you get, the tougher. As you near your genetic ceiling, get closer and closer. It's going to be tougher to remember. Oh, did I add 2 pounds last time?
Right.
It's not. You're not always going to have these big jumps, but you do always want to be having that incremental progress.
Indeed. And again, if you're recovering, usually you can see progress quite frequently. That's another thing. People have come to have diminished expectations of what's happening, and they don't recognize the recovery part. If you're recovering effectively, you'll find that you make progress almost every single workout. That's where you have to have a floating recovery or ways to manipulate that rest, because if you stay on that Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I always bench or whatever, right? You're going to quickly hit the wall for most people. And I've run into guys so obstinate about it. I had a guy who was obsessed with bench pressing, and he would bench press 3 times a week, and he had to do it. And he was strong. He was bench pressing over 300 pounds, but he had been stuck in a specific number for months and months and months. And I kept on telling him, if you just take a few days off, you're going to set a PR, But he's like, I got to do it 3 times a week. Got to bench. You know what I mean? And he never stopped, and he never made progress beyond that point. And I've experienced it myself, where in my own workouts, I stuck to a very strict schedule and hit that wall where I couldn't understand why I wasn't going up in weight or reps on a specific exercise. And it took me a long time back then to recognize that I wasn't recovering enough.
Right. So what does active recovery look like? I mean, because I think it definitely ties into some emotional things that are going on. If you feel like, if you are, especially with people who are committed to, say, weight loss, there's a perception out there that you need to put in as much time as possible. Like you did, and there's even like, an ego, issue that goes along with that, where, you want to be seen in the gym. You want to be known that you are doing that.
Right.
Workout all the time. So how do we stay away from the gym? If you're,
you don't necessarily need to stay away from the gym, but you need to stay away from the strength training, right? You don't need to strength train. No one in the world needs to strength train more than 3 times a week. And most people, as they get stronger, 1 or 2 times a week is enough. Again, the science is showing that recovery process takes a certain number of days, right? You can't change that. Sort of like the laws of physics, right? We've created that stimulus, and the recovery process has to happen. Most people come back and interrupt it before it's even complete. Okay, so again, most of the science is showing that 5 to 7 days is pretty normal for people. So that's why no one really needs to recover or train more than 3 times. Okay, you have to be someone who recovers effectively to be able to get away with 3 times a week.
Right.
Or you need to split your body into pieces where there's no overlap. We won't go into that now. But you can certainly come in the gym. If I came in the gym on Monday and I did a nice hard strength training workout, I could come back on Tuesday and I could do some low intensity cardio stuff just to move, get the blood flowing. Yeah, get the blood flowing.
Get the recumbent bike.
Move, do some stretching. Show my face in the gym.
Yoga.
Right, exactly. But I'm not challenging the system at that same intense level. There needs to be a base of low intensity work. That's great. It's good for your heart and good for your lungs. Good for emotional, mental stuff. 1 or 2 intense strength sessions a week and then I also think sprinting of some time, some sort of anaerobic, all-out conditioning work once every 10 days or so is really effective too. And that's, it doesn't have to be actual sprinting like a guy on a 100-meter track. It could be on a machine, but it's, again, very brief, very intense with long recovery periods in between. It's not your classic cardio stuff.
So just to kind of summarize, because we've thrown a lot of stuff out there, what we're saying here is what Liam just touched on, the kind of 10-day window. If you do a hard full body workout, and that could be 3 exercises, you could do a push pull squat to failure, each one. The workout could last 10 minutes, and you're only doing that every 10 days. You're saying that could be enough to get stronger.
It can be, for sure. There's no doubt about it. And again, each person is going to be slightly different, right? Humans are based on a broad continuum, genetics, emotional stuff. There's all kinds of things in there, right? But most people, somewhere in that 7 to 10 days, are going to see a benefit. Could you get away with more? You could. Do you need to? Not necessarily. It takes personal experimentation, right? But the goal is to recognize that don't be obsessed with the frequency and the volume. But again, we start from that place of what's the least amount I need. If once a week is producing the result, why would you add a second one?
Right.
Or if you found that you were doing 2 and your results are slowing down, if you add recovery, usually you'll see improvements. Another thing that people get stuck in is this Gregorian calendar of, like I must fit it into that Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or that 7-day week or whatever. Having a floating schedule is much more true to our own individuality. Jesse, through practice, may find that every 4th day is really good for him. So he might train on Monday, take Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday off, train on Friday, take Saturday, Sunday, Monday off, train on Tuesday, like that, and not be stuck and just let it float. And that works really well also if people have the ability. So many people are stuck in this regimented lifestyle that they feel they got to cram it in to that 7-day cycle. You know what I mean?
And there are practical issues there. If you're trying to work with your trainer, you need to work out, schedule. Not everybody can just say, call up their trainer and say, hey, you gotta
exactly
on. And trainers the same way. You're not always going to be able to just fit somebody in on the fly like that. But that is the way our bodies work. And I think on the whole, most people need more recovery than they think they need.
Definitely. I always am a fan of the idea of having more off days than on days when it comes to strength training.
Yeah.
Not the other way.
And that's a good distinction to make. We're not saying, if you're a baseball player, we're not saying, don't go play baseball because you're recovering from your strength training, right?
Absolutely.
So
you have to practice the skills of your sport if you're an athlete. We're going to remember I mentioned in our first podcast, I think, the SPICE acronyms, which we still haven't addressed. We're going to come back to that.
Okay.
But that's about training specifically for sports. It's what I use when people ask me, what about sports-specific programs? So we need to think about that. And there's a real simple formula that I use for that.
It's a little nugget for you.
Yeah.
Leave them on the edge of the cliff there. Okay, I think we're getting close here. The last question I have is, why don't you think more people are doing effort-based training?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the truth is, it's really hard to know in the big picture how many people are doing it. But it definitely seems, even today, to not be the dominant methodology. If there was some way to measure, we might find that it's actually quite even. As an example, 50%, roughly 50% of the NFL trains using effort-based training.
Right.
Roughly 50%.
Wow.
Many big successful college programs, Stanford, Michigan State, Penn State, Kentucky, Florida State. A lot of big college programs use effort-based training programs. Okay.
Right.
Big programs. On any given sport, on any given day, on any given game, if you're watching, I defy you to be able to look at an athlete while he's playing his sport and tell me which one is doing effort-based training and which one is doing, Olympic lifting, for instance. It doesn't matter. You can never tell. Many of the best football teams in the world, in the NFL, for instance, have been effort-based. The Dolphins, the Washington Redskins, during the time when they won them in the 80s, when they won the Super Bowl multiple times, they were always doing one set to failure, machine-based training, no free weights.
Kind of seems like to me that people know how well it works, and they don't want to tell anyone because they know how well it works.
Yeah, who knows?
Especially those top-level pro teams.
Yeah.
Why would they give away those secrets?
Again, Stanford has been an effort-based programs for years. If you follow football, for instance, we had Jim Harbaugh at Stanford. Yeah. His head strength coach was a guy named Kevin Tolbert. If you know anything about the high-intensity training world, Kevin Tolbert's father is Ken Leistner. Ken Leistner, we'll go into him someday. He's awesome. Tolbert was the head strength coach at Stanford. When Harbaugh got the job at the 49ers, he took Tolbert with him. Harbaugh left the 49ers. He went to Michigan. He took Tolbert with him. Now Tolbert's the head strength coach of Michigan. Same guy that's doing the same kind of work. He knows that it's effective. He brought that guy with him. That happens a lot in the athlete world, right? They bring in their guys. But yeah, so just as an example now, Michigan for years has been effort-based, and they got a new coach, and they still are in that effort-based training method. They had a guy named Mike Gittleson there who's a genius. He was there for like 30 years. Now Kevin Tolbert again. Kevin Tolbert is, just look him up, Google him. He was a running back at Navy back in the day, and a monster, genetic monster. His dad, again, one of the most brilliant guys in strength training, Ken Leistner. So yeah, stuff we can talk about and definitely people to explore.
So those are the top level people. I think another reason that maybe high intensity stuff, and again, we're talking about, 1 set to failure per exercise. It's hard. It's really freaking hard. You have to work your butt off, and it's uncomfortable.
And again, remember I was saying earlier, way back, several sets is still okay as long as it's effort-based, right? In Michigan, Ken Manny, another brilliant guy, they often do more than 1 set, but all those sets are as hard as possible, right? They're not doing pyramiding and, they play with lots of things, but the reality is that effort-based is the dominant approach, right? And, they use all kinds of tools, all kinds of toys, and they're not lost in whether they use a barbell or not. But I can tell you they don't do any Olympic weightlifting in any of those programs. There's no power cleans or any of that kind of stuff.
We'll get into that in future episodes. Anything else you want to get through before
we're rambling
sign
here.
off? I think we have like 9 whole listeners now. It's pretty
all
cool.
right, yeah, that's awesome, man. Call it.
So this is Jesse and Liam signing off. Liam's on a phone call now, so it's got to be pretty important. If you caught this, thank you for tuning in, and we'll get back to you next week. Cheers.
Boom, baby! What's up, people? Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Truth Not Trends. That's right here at TNT Strength Headquarters, Truth Not Trends.
Please, if you enjoyed this episode, subscribe, rate, and review us on whatever platform you're listening to us on. And don't forget to share with a friend.
You can find us on the web at tntstrength.com.
That's right, TNT Strength now coming to you in person at 5255 College Avenue in Oakland, California. You can call the studio 510-768-5421. You can also text us at 855-796-9905.
Or shoot us an email at contact@tntstrength.com. And whatever you do, stay off of that stupid blue bubbly boasting.
Oh, my lucky stars!
Mixed and edited by Desmond McNeese for We Mixed It. Go to whatsoundsawesome.com.